don't know how to cook up, I got a cookie for 'em.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E. S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are back for another one. It is sweltering out here. But we got a new topic for you. New topic. Terence Crawford says he's never had a close fight in his career. Errol Spence, your resume is full of bums. So Terence Crawford says he's never had a close fight / tough fight in his entire boxing career. What could that possibly mean, or what could that tell you about his actual boxing career up until this point? Well, either you've been cherry picking fights, your promoter's been cherry picking fights, you've been catching fighters at the right time, or you're just not fighting high level competition. There's no way any champion boxer should be saying that they've never had a hard fight or a tough fight or a challenge in their entire career, because that means that you're not challenging yourself. You refuse to put yourself in a situation to where you might lose.
Man, I didn't like that dude at all. I never knew where the hatred came from.
Now, is Terence Crawford wrong for picking low-level competition? Is he wrong for not challenging himself as a welterweight? Is he wrong for allowing his promoter to face him up with not top-level competition from the majority of his boxing career? No, he's not wrong for any of those things. It's just easy for real boxing fans to see that you are not what you say you are. You're not on the level that you're degrading Errol Spence for being on, because simply put, Errol Spence did fight a bunch of champion fighters. He did fight a bunch of tough fights, some fights that he could have possibly lost.
Gamboa. Then when I got, set to fight Gamboa, everybody was like, oh man, he shouldn't be fighting Gamboa right now, because
if he didn't utilize his talents to the best of his ability. And this is the reason I think Errol Spence has more fans and a bigger fan base and sells better than Terence Bud Crawford, is that he actually does challenge himself to where Terence Crawford it almost seems like it's just all about the money. He takes the fights that make him the best money. He takes the fights that gets him in front of the biggest audience, but he doesn't take the fights that would be considered tough fights, losable fights. For instance, the Pacquiao fight could have been a great fight for Terence Crawford, could have been a career-defining fight. Could have lost that fight as well, but he never took it, so we'll never know.
Like, you're never going to make the people satisfied. I feel like I already proved everything that I have to prove.
The Ugas fight, he had the Ugas fight. The Ugas fight was there to be made before he made the Shawn Porter fight, and while Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao were working out the terms of their fights. Ugas didn't have an opponent. Crawford didn't have an opponent. Now, he could be the two-time champion if he would have challenged himself and took the Ugas fight, but instead he went with a lower-level opponent, someone who'd been laid off for 2 years, someone who was past their prime, obviously, because of how he did him in the ring, and someone who he should have never been in the ring with in the first place. Plus, he's friends with this person. So there's all kind of conflicts of interest all over the board when it comes to Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter.
When you think about it, everything that I've done in my career to this date, they still feel like I haven't done anything. I ain't done nothing in the welterweight division, but what about my career?
But, that's one of the fights that people give him the most credit for taking, is the Shawn Porter fight. Look how he did Shawn Porter. It took Errol Spence such and such amount of time to beat Shawn Porter, and Bud Crawford knocked him out, which he didn't knock him out. He stopped him. Shawn Porter's father stopped the fight. That's not a knockout. That's a technical knockout. that means the fight was stopped, not that you physically knocked him out with your punching power. He was never put to sleep. So you can put that argument to sleep. As well as Shawn Porter, I think, did that fight strictly for the money. I think that was his cash out fight. Biggest fight of his boxing career. If he did win, he would have been right back on top, you know, but if he lost, I don't think he really cared. He got a big paycheck and he was already done with the sport anyway.
And then you just ask him, you say, what haven't I accomplished in the sport of boxing?
And then you got the flip side of the coin. You have Errol Spence Jr. And Errol Spence Jr. said Terence Crawford's resume is filled with bums. Now, could you say that those fighters that he fought were all bums? I mean, you can't say that. He did have a lot of decent level competition at 140. My whole gripe, like I've always told y'all with Terence Crawford, is what he's done as a welterweight, or what he hasn't done as a welterweight, which is challenge himself. At 147, he has not challenged himself at all. And listen, some of those fights, they were not his fault. You know, the Kell Brook fight, it could have been a challenge, but Brook was already done. So you can't blame Crawford for Brook taking a fight he shouldn't have been in. Shawn Porter was already done. You can't blame Crawford for putting himself in a good position against a fighter who's technically already done. Listen, he doesn't know that. He's just facing up with the opponent they put in front of him. But you have to admit as a boxing fan that those guys were not at their pinnacle anymore. They weren't at their peak. They weren't high level competition. So I think when it comes to welterweight, you can say that the guys he fought, most of them were bums or leftovers of Errol Spence, because Spence had already beaten them and taken either their belts or their pride from. So I think Errol Spence has a valid point. Your resume as a welterweight is full of bums. I think Terence Crawford toots his horn way too much. I think Terence Crawford gives himself too many pats on the back for Bob Arum kind of setting his career off, you know. And look how he did Bob Arum. Bob Arum put you in a position to be the fighter that you are. A lot of those fights were fights that Bob Arum made for you. Most of those fights were fights that Bob Arum made for you. Bob Arum made you a millionaire, and you turned around and bit him in the butt like a rabid pit bull. So I'm not surprised that Terence Crawford behaves the way he behaves, you know, that he talks the way he talks. Because when you got the big head and you haven't proven yourself, you tend to be egotistical.
Win the Hall of Fame. Win the Hall of Fame. Win the Hall of Fame.
And to be completely honest with you, that's one of the reasons I'm rolling with Errol Spence Jr. is the fact that Errol Spence seems to be egoless when it comes to the way he talks about and approaches the sport of boxing, because he seems like he would much rather fight the tough fights, the champion fighters. And he knows that tough fights get you praise. Tough fights get you more accolades. Fighting the best opponents will get you them thumbs up from fight fans, and people will follow you if you're challenging yourself. But if you're not challenging yourself, then you're going to be like Bud Crawford, an extremely talented fighter who people can't stand because you never put yourself in a position to challenge yourself.
This off the list. This off the list. What award haven't I won?
When you do, the fighters are already past their prime, so who cares about those fights at that point? You know, and I think Crawford fans refuse to see that and refuse to accept it for what it is, you know. But at the end of the day, I think this fight in November is going to prove not only that Errol Spence is the better of these two fighters, but ego can be the death knell of a boxing career if you allow it to be. Let me know what y'all think about that, man, in the comment section below. Hit that like button for me, share, subscribe. Tell a friend, holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but you're more than likely to get a response on YouTube, so holler at me over there if you want a response. It's your boy, it's hot. I'm done rambling. Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E AHAT, if that's what you want to call me. And we are out of here.
And I'm really trying to see about all you niggas talk.